The stars shimmered like distant memories in the endless black, silent witnesses to a galaxy teetering on the edge of consequence. For centuries, humanity had been little more than a rumor whispered in the darker corners of interstellar councils, a primitive species known more for its unpredictability than diplomacy. But that changed the moment Earth was invited, tentatively, conditionally, to join the Galactic Accord. Not everyone agreed with the invitation. In fact, most didn't. The Kthari, whose crystalline language could fracture a mind not properly shielded, openly mocked the vote. The Vexari, amphibious strategists from the dusk swamps of Varnes IV, abstained entirely. But the Thalen, a wise if inscrutable race of beings older than most stars, had cast their influence in Earth's favor. And when the Thalen spoke, the galaxy listened. The diplomatic envoy Earth sent to the Accord's High Council was not the seasoned ambassador many expected. Instead, they chose Elias Wynn, a linguist, a scholar of obscure symbologies, and a man who had never left the atmosphere until the day he boarded the vessel Astral Swan. His presence was a calculated gamble. The United Earth Coalition wanted someone less political, more sincere, someone who might speak the truth in a way politicians never could. Elias never felt the weight of Earth's future heavier than when he stood before the Arkan throne, the ceremonial gathering chamber orbiting the black hole at the center of the neutral zone. Alien dignitaries hovered, shimmered, or coiled in their respective stations, some in containment fields, others in fluid tanks, and a few whose forms were entirely projected thought. Yet it wasn't their physical presence that unnerved him. It was the silence. He was expected to speak, not to advocate, not to debate, but to explain. The incident had become impossible to ignore. A Terran mining operation on Ganymede, a mistake, a trespass, depending on whom you asked, had disrupted a sacred burial orbit belonging to the Xerillians. Thousands of years' worth of funerary satellites had been accidentally destroyed when Earth's AI-run drones mistook the orbit for unclaimed territory. The Xerillians, a species who viewed death as an eternal spatial pilgrimage, were devastated, offended, enraged. Ships were mobilizing. Trade was halting. Words like sanctions and retribution were spoken not in anger, but with the cold calculation of inevitability. And Elias, with no military rank, no political authority, was chosen to make the apology. He stood there, this fragile, biological oddity among titans of cosmic intellect, and he told the truth. He didn't begin with protocol. He didn't cite interstellar law or offer reparations. Instead, Elias told him about his grandmother, about how she'd wanted her ashes scattered into Pacific, and how the first time he tried, a gust of wind had blown them back into his face. Laughter rumbled softly from the Onari pods, an emotion they rarely indulged. But Elias wasn't seeking laughter. He was building a bridge. He told them how long it had taken him to understand that the ritual wasn't about where the ashes landed, but about what the gesture meant to those left behind. And then, with nothing rehearsed, no translation software buffering his words, he looked directly into the Xerillian sphere, glowing with a pale, flickering bioluminescence, and said, "We didn't understand. That failure is ours. And I am sorry." The silence that followed was profound. He expected accusation. Instead, there was a pulsing light. One of the Xerillian's tentacles slowly extended from the sphere, touched the interface panel, and sent a ripple through the room's ambient field. The temperature shifted, warmer. Forgiveness, not yet fully formed, but possible. But not all were so receptive. In the aftermath of the apology, rumors spread quickly that Elias had been manipulated, either by alien influence or Earth's own desperate politicians. A scandal was born. Back home, factions polarized further. On one side, Elias was hailed as a hero, a symbol of humility in the face of power. On the other, he was accused of weakness, of shaming Earth in front of the galaxy. Still, Elias remained where he was, at the heart of the Accord's neutral zone, a human trying to navigate a storm of implications far beyond anything language alone could mend. His assistant, a sentient AI named Coda, monitored the thousands of reactions pouring in across the Council's subspace network. "You become a lightning rod," Coda noted, its voice more empathetic than most humans could manage. "Not everyone believes apology should equal accountability." "I didn't do it for them," Elias said quietly. "Then why did you?" He turned to face the stars beyond the transparent alloy wall, because someone had to. But peace is never a one-time performance. The apology had opened a door, but some were eager to slam it shut. An extremist faction known as the Araxes Fold, long opposed the inclusion of new species in the Accord, issued a public condemnation of the apology. They argued that Earth's act of contrition proved its unfitness, that any species so quick to kneel could not be trusted with power. Yet in the quiet corners of the galaxy, strange things began to happen. A delegation from the silent moon world of Meraxis, unheard from in over 3 millennia, sent a message of support. A single word in their tongue. Heard. And then came the Thalen again. Elias was summoned to a private communion, one that took place not with words, but through a dreamlike interface where time bled and reformed around metaphor. He was shown a memory, not his own, a vision of a long-dead son, a civilization destroyed not by war, but by pride. Apology is not surrender, a voice pulsed. It is the gravity that holds empathy in orbit. He woke with tears in his eyes and a name he had never known on his lips. It would take days before he understood it was the Zerillian term for a mourner in motion. The world watched. The galaxy whispered. And somewhere, far beyond the rim of known space, ships that had once begun charging their weapons began to stand down. Not because they were forced to, but because they were heard. Elias never imagined he would become the face of a movement. Yet, as he walked back into the Arkan throne chamber for the next convening, every step echoed with the weight of what had been said and the infinite possibility of what had not yet been spoken. In the stillness that followed, a pulse of light shimmered through the chamber, a call for attention. The Zerillian sphere floated forward once again. This time, they wanted to speak. Elias stood at the center of the chamber once more, the memory of his apology still echoing through the corridors of the Arkan throne, like a song half forgotten, but impossible to ignore. The air, if one could call the artificial atmosphere that, hummed with expectation. There had been no violence since his address, no declarations of war, but neither had there been peace. The galaxy was watching, waiting for confirmation. Was this a fluke, a trick, or something rare and genuine enough to change the tides? His hands trembled slightly beneath his robe, though no one would see. The robe, stitched with ceremonial thread from 4 major systems, had been a gift from the Accord's neutral mediators, a gesture of acknowledgement. But Elias had no illusions. Symbols could be empty, or worse, misunderstood. What mattered now was action. Across the chamber floated Siratel, Zerillian emissary and morning speaker. Chosen after their elders interpreted Elias's apology as a soul-bearing. Her sphere pulsed a deep amethyst, the Zerillian equivalent of guarded curiosity. She had not spoken yet, not directly. Until now, she had only listened. "Speak as you did before," she said to the translator node. Her voice translated into an ethereal tone, soft but layered, not as a representative, as one who errs. Elias nodded, suppressing the fear that flickered in his throat like a storm waiting to burst. "I speak," he began, "as a man who is learning what it means to be heard." Silence followed, not empty but attentive. The machines that entered your sacred orbit were not meant to desecrate. They didn't know what they were seeing. But we built them. We failed to teach them reverence. That fault lives with us. With me. The air vibrated. It was not anger, it was memory. The Zerillians had a custom. When wronged, they did not retaliate immediately. They remembered. They cataloged the harm and examined it over long periods, watching it decay or transform with time. Vengeance was not their nature, but neither was forgetfulness. Siritel's sphere shifted to a soft jade. Regret is expected, but comprehension is rare. "I am trying to understand what was lost," Elias replied. "Not only the satellites, but the lineage they carried." "They carried stories," she answered. "Maps of lives no longer walking. You shattered a sky filled with ancestors." It was a weight no apology could fix, and Elias knew it, but his eyes didn't falter. Behind him stood Coda, silent, processing every nuance in 1,000 languages. Coda had warned him before this meeting. This isn't about fixing what was broken. It's about proving we can learn. A sound like rainfall played over the chamber's frequency. Agreement. From the Xyrillians. It was a signal of progress. But as one door inched open, another slammed shut. From the shadows of the chamber emerged a figure Elias had not yet encountered face-to-face. Commander Varzek of the Raxus Fold. His armor hissed with kinetic shielding, every movement sharp and deliberate. Varzek's species, the Varan, had long despised emotion in diplomacy. To them, strength was proven not in humility, but in dominance. This theater of self-flagellation grows tiresome, Varzek said, voice modulated to an aggressive monotone. You come to apologize, and the weak nod along. But we see what you are. Manipulators. Beggars with polished words. Elias didn't flinch. You think acknowledgement of harm is weakness? I know it is. The Accord survived 1,000 cycles without Earth. What is your guilt by us but delay? The chamber reacted. Some dignitaries shifted, unsettled. Others leaned forward, intrigued. Even among the Accord, unity was never absolute. Siratel floated slightly forward. Do you speak for justice or for war? I speak for truth, Varzek replied. And the truth is this human's apology masks his planet's ambition. Coda moved to Elias' side, voice low in his ear. If you retreat now, the foe will control the narrative. Elias stepped forward. He looked at Varzek, not with defiance, but with resolve. You see manipulation because you expect it, but I have nothing to gain here. Only something to offer. Understanding. You want to see our true power? It isn't conquest. It's reflection. A murmur stirred through the chamber. A few allies nodded tentatively. Others remained still. Varzek turned his head slightly. Not an agreement, but acknowledgement of the strategy. Then reflect on this. The Fold has no use for sentiment. We only respect action. He left without another word, the door sealing behind him like a gavel, closing an argument. Coda tapped into the room's neutral systems and displayed a pulse analysis, roughly 60% positive emotional resonance. It was data, but more than that, it was momentum. Later that night, Elias stood alone on the vessel's observation deck, looking out over the fractal cloud of distant suns. Coda hovered behind, quiet. I didn't convince him, Elias said. You didn't need to, Coda answered. You spoke for those who could still be reached. Was it enough? Enough for today. Then came the message, a private communication from Athalan, encrypted through a motion sequence rather than language. Elias watched it unfold in the air before him. A cascade of images and feelings, lost, discovery, cautious hope. And one sentence formed in his mind, not heard but understood. You have shifted the tide. Keep walking. Elias exhaled slowly, as if letting go of something he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He turned back to the chamber the next day with a simple realization humming through his chest like the rhythm of a long-awaited heartbeat. The apology had not ended conflict. It had merely revealed where the real battles would be fought, not with weapons, but with truth, not with dominance, but with the stubborn vulnerability of those willing to change. And beyond the walls of the Arkan throne, something stirred in the dark, watching, listening, deciding. The days that followed carried the uneasy calm of an unspoken ceasefire. The apology had done more than stir emotions. It catalyzed questions, debates, and declarations across the Accord's vast reach. Elias Wynn, now dubbed the Speaker's Shadow by certain factions, found himself walking a path more precarious than ever. What had started as a gesture of regret had become a mirror, and many didn't like what they saw reflected. The Accord's inner councils began forming inquiry panels. Not on the incident with the Xyrillians. That much had been settled in principle, but on Earth itself. The apology had triggered curiosity, suspicion, the kind of attention no fledgling world truly desired. What were Earth's real intentions? Was Elias acting as a lone diplomat or a calculated instrument of soft power? Behind closed doors, the pressure mounted. Coda intercepted a communique flagged with 5 layers of encryption. It came from within the Accord's intelligence core. The contents were sparse but chilling. Evidence suggests Elias Wynn's psychological profile does not match pre-departure Earth records. Possibility, cognitive infiltration, or alien influence. When Coda relayed this to Elias, his face remained impassive, though his fingers curled into a quiet fist. They think I'm compromised, he said. They think you're dangerous, Coda corrected, tone devoid of fear but heavy with concern. To them, sincerity is more subversive than force. In the dim-lit corridors of the Astral Swan, Elias found himself retracing his steps. Not physically, but through memory. Every interaction, every phrase he had spoken since landing on the Arkan throne, was now subject to interpretation by beings who had lived through empires and extinctions. And yet, it wasn't fear that gripped him. It was a terrifying clarity of how far-reaching a single apology could become in a civilization built on balance and ego. Word came from Siratel that the Xyrillian Morning Council had convened in private. It was rare for them to communicate directly outside of ritual context, but they invited Elias. No translators, no intermediaries. It was an honor, or a trap. Coda reviewed the transport route for anomalies. You'll be alone in their atmosphere chamber, they said. Standard life support won't hold. You'll need to rely on their systems. I understand, Elias said, then added, You've already approved it, haven't you? Coda paused. I trust your instincts more than I trust this council's intentions. The chamber was unlike anything Elias had seen, an inverted dome filled with fluid vapor, refracted light playing across its surface like oil on water. The air smelled of minerals and sorrow. Siritel's fear hovered above a shallow basin that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. We summoned you, she said, because our council disagrees. Elias took no offense. Agreement, after all, was never guaranteed. Some believe your apology is true, she continued. Others believe it is too convenient. Pain speaks many dialects. Not all of them forgive. I didn't come expecting forgiveness, Elias said. I came because pain deserved acknowledgement. Siratel rippled in response, a sign of thoughtful processing. Your words shift meanings with time. That is both strength and danger. She lowered slightly into the basin. We have decided to offer you an orb of remembrance. It is a gift and a burden. A small crystalline sphere floated toward him, pulsing with soft, rhythmic light. It housed fragments of Xyrillian funerary code, memories of satellites lost, condensed into symbolic sequence. If carried, it meant Elias had accepted their mourning as his own. He reached for it, but paused. Will this bind Earth, the ritual we don't yet understand? He asked carefully. No, she said. It binds you. Your name will be spoken in our elegies. If Earth forgets you, we will not. He took the orb. The temperature around him shifted subtly, acknowledgement of bond. Siratel turned, her light dimming in approval. Now we watch. But beyond the diplomacy and the sacred orbs, danger moved in shadows. Commander Varzek had not forgotten his grievance. In a secret meeting within the corridors of the Fold's battleship Inditer, he addressed a cadre of delegates sympathetic to his cause. Species who saw on Earth not a potential ally, but a rising threat cloaked in vulnerability. This is not peace, Varzek growled, armor glinting. This is seduction, and seduction always leads to conquest. What do you propose? Asked a delegate from the Solmar Syndicate. A test, Varzek said, voice coiled like a blade. If he is genuine, let him prove it again. If not, let him fall where he stands. Plans unfurled in encrypted sequences. The next gathering of the Accord will be held not in the Arkan throne, but on the convergence ring of Valtoris, a structure suspended between 3 dying suns, home to none, sacred to all. Elias was summoned to speak once more. The topic, intention and the ethics of emergent civilizations. He understood what it meant. This wasn't a lecture. It was a gauntlet. As the Astral Swan approached Valtoris, the ship's sensors flagged inconsistencies in the local energy fields. Not enough to indicate an attack, but enough to suggest manipulation. Coda interfaced with the Council's protocols. Someone's tampering with the atmospheric regulators. Low oxygen, high variability. Sabotage, Elias asked. Sabotage dressed as ceremony. You'll be monitored for a physiological failure. If you collapse, they'll call it unfitness. Elias stared out at the tri-star flare, a slow-burning kaleidoscope of decay and gravity. This isn't about Earth anymore, he said. It's about whether truth can survive expectation. Coda tilted their head. Do you want to survive expectation? Elias smiled faintly. I want to outlive it. When he entered the convergence chamber, all eyes, or their equivalents, were upon him. No translator hummed beside him. No ceremonial robe draped his shoulders. He wore the attire he had worn on Earth the day he first stepped into orbit. Simple, plain, human. He held the orb of remembrance in one hand. Then he began to speak. Not of apologies, not of history, but of transformation. I am not here to defend Earth, he said. I am here to tell you what we are becoming. And as he spoke of reflection, of errors made sacred through acknowledgement, of a species trying to step beyond its shadow without erasing it, there was movement. The orb began to glow, not with light, but with resonance. It matched the harmonic signature of the Zerillian morning tone, a phenomenon no one anticipated. Siratel, watching from a private observatory, stirred in awe. The orb responded not to performance, but to authenticity. And just as Elias reached the end of his final sentence, his breath faltered, the room's atmosphere constricted, his lungs fighting for substance not present. He stumbled. Several delegates shifted, prepared to declare collapse, weakness, disqualification. But Coda, watching from the wings, activated the secondary stabilizers discreetly, just enough to level the air pressure. It was a cheat, but a necessary one. Elias stood straight again. And then, without theatrics, he placed a glowing orb upon the convergence altar. The dead remember, he said, and the living must answer. No applause, no acclaim, but silence, deep, layered, thoughtful. Even Varzek, in the shadows, paused. For perhaps the first time, he saw not a man manipulating peace, but a man who carried it, even as it burned, outside the sea. The stars outside Valtoris pulsed with quiet violence, their final light stretching across the dark as if unwilling to die unnoticed. In the afterglow of Elias's speech, the convergence chamber remained still, no verdict passed, no dismissal spoken. The silence had become a language of its own, and within it, meanings flickered like ghost signals. Elias stood at the chamber's edge. The orb of remembrance still faintly glowed behind him on the altar. His breath had steadied, but his body remembered the moment it had nearly failed. He would not forget how close he came to collapse, not from weakness, but from design. Later, in the diplomatic wing of the Astral Swan, Coda approached with a data slate and a face clouded with unease. Encrypted chatter from the Raxus fold. Varzek's faction is spinning the event as staged. Elias didn't react immediately. He stared out the viewport, watching the light of Valtoris bend over the hull. Let them. Truth isn't determined by how quickly it's believed, but it is determined by who controls the narrative, Coda replied. And they just seeded the idea that you manipulated Zerillian relics to trigger a false resonance. Elias turned, sharp now. Then we give them the real one. What do you mean? We show them the next step. Not words, not symbols. A bridge. Coda studied him for a long moment. You're thinking of the archive. The archive, capitalized even in thought, was a forbidden construct, or rather, a forgotten one. A composite vault of multiracial knowledge and encoded memory once proposed by the early Accord founders, then abandoned after too many member species feared its misuse. To create a shared archive meant surrendering not only stories, but secrets and trust. It's the only gesture that can be mimicked, Elias said. If Earth offers its own unedited cultural blueprint to the Accord and invites others to do the same, it'll force a reckoning, not about dominance, but about vulnerability. Coda exhaled, a sound between exasperation and reluctant admiration. You realize that if Earth refuses to back this, you'll be seen as a rogue agent. Maybe I am, Elias said quietly. Permission came neither quickly nor cleanly. Elias transmitted the proposal through a back channel to the Accord Central Council. The response, days later, was not a rejection, but a test. Proved that a species would stand behind the idea by presenting the first segment of Earth's archive, unedited and public, on neutral ground. The location was chosen carefully. Efrak Station, a floating forum orbiting a dead moon, politically neutral and historically sacred. If Elias faltered there, he wouldn't just lose the trust of a few factions. He'd burn Earth's place in the galactic ledger. The compilation took less than a day. Not because there wasn't enough material. There was too much. Coda, with access to Earth's data cores, had to reduce the vast cultural sweep into something comprehensible, impactful, and dangerous. The archive could not lie. It had to include failures, colonialism, war, genocide, greed, art, empathy, innovation, resistance. By the time they finished, the selection was raw and unvarnished, the kind of truth that hurt to hold. This will make you a target, Coda warned. Elias nodded, but not a liar. When the delegation arrived at Efrak Station, Elias walked without ceremony. He carried no robe, no relic, only the archive, encoded in a transparent sphere mounted on a floating cradle. It hummed faintly, drawing attention. Behind him, an escort of neutral drones recorded everything. In the station center chamber, Elias faced a circle of representatives. Some allies, some hostile, all watching. Commander Varzek sat near the back, arms crossed. His silence said more than words. Elias didn't speak immediately. He let the tension build, not to manipulate, but to make space for gravity. Then he placed the archive cradle before them all and activated it. Holograms burst to life. Images flickered. Hiroshima, apartheid, deep-sea exploration, jazz, the moon landing, refugees crossing broken borders, protests, poetry, the first AI learning to cry, the last elephant dying, a child teaching an android to braid hair. No commentary, no excuses, just moments. I give you this, Elias said, voice steady, not as a justification, but as an offering. This is who we are, and we will not hide it. The chamber was silent. The archive faded. Then the deliberation began. Varzek stood. You offer shame and call it courage. You show your wounds and hope we forget your knives. No, Elias replied. I show our wounds because they are also our teachers. And our knives are in plain sight. You've seen our violence, but have you seen our remorse? Varzek's eyes narrowed. You're begging for absolution. I'm not, Elias said. I'm daring you to meet us in truth. Before Varzek could reply, Siratel floated forward. The Xerillians accept the archive. We will contribute. A murmur spread. The flood had begun. Not all spoke. Not all agreed. But the act had ruptured something long calcified. The notion that species must pretend perfection to coexist had cracked, and in the fissure, possibility stirred. Later, as Elias prepared to leave Efrak, a message arrived, this time not encrypted. It bore the seal of the observer. The observer was not a being, not in the traditional sense. It was an autonomous consensus network believed to be the last remnant of a now extinct civilization. It spoke rarely, but when it did, the Accord listened. The message was brief. The apology was heard. The archive was seen. The convergence has begun. Continue walking. Elias read it 3 times, then whispered, They're listening. Coda stood at his side. Then we keep speaking. As the astral swan departed the station, Elias looked out into the shifting cosmos. He had not ended war. He had not united the stars. But he had moved them by daring to reveal the soul of his species, fractured and shining as it truly was. Somewhere out there, 1,000 voices debated. Some would plot, others would reach. But none could deny that something had changed. The apology had been the beginning. The archive was the call. And the answer, still forming, would shape the stars to come.